Hey everyone, this is Dr. Nabiha Kelly with Tea Time with Dr. Kelly. Thank you for joining us today. We are on an amazing journey preparing for our podcast. Do me a favor before we even go into the episodes. Just begin to like, subscribe on below, share, tag, click the link and give it to someone. And also remember, do the notification tab that when we come on, we pop up. We have some awesome guests. We have people who are coming to drop some gems as they spill the tea in their industries. And we're looking forward for a dynamic time. So thank you for joining us. We look forward to seeing you. We look forward to engaging with you. And as you spill the tea, we shall pour into you. Good day, everyone. This is your girl, Dr. Nabiha Kelly with the podcast, Tea Time with Dr. Kelly. How many of you have been blessed? How many of you have been encouraged by the last couple of episodes? Do me a favor, if you're seeing me on your screen, I want you to subscribe below. I want you to begin to write in the comment section what particular podcast episode that you thought was phenomenal. And also, if there are any topics that you want to discuss, whether it be marriage, singleness, career, entrepreneurship, whatever it is, I just want you all to just begin to feel comfortable to drop your comments in the comment section. We have been on an amazing journey with starting Tea Time with Dr. Kelly, and I decided to come on as we have entered into the third quarter. We've entered into July, where the first jump start of the fiscal year starts, and a lot of things are happening in the month of July. And particularly, we are in the third quarter where most companies have more income. We have companies where they hire people, as well as companies who endorse businesses. And I just wanted to talk about things that are exciting in the month of July. One, we're going to talk about friendships. We're going to talk about millennial dating, Gen Z dating, dating in this era. Also, this month is a month that is very delicate because it deals with mental health. And I think that that's a particular area that most people kind of like tiptoe around, but I want to talk about that in particular at this episode. Those of you who are watching, the reason why I created Tea Time with Dr. Kelly is for people in different industries to come in, whether you are in government, business, the pillar of religion, the spheres of influence, where it's business, where it's arts and entertainment, media, education. And it's for someone to come in to spill the tea in their industry, and that we're an expert in our own story. So today, this particular episode, I want to talk to you all about something that is dear to my heart, dealing with shame, rejection, emotional wounds. And these are topics that most people don't really understand, because sometimes you're just going through things and you're dealing with trauma, you're dealing with generational wounds, you're dealing with that in and outside of ministry, in and outside of business, in and outside of just everyday life. And we don't normally sit down long enough to deal with our mental health. Sometimes people tell you just gloss over it, or it's just never ever discussed. And sometimes people don't want to deal with mental illness or mental health. Mental health is different from mental illness, because mental illness comes with a diagnosis from the DSM-5, right? So you will have to be diagnosed from like a psychologist or a psychiatrist of having a mental health disorder. But mental health is a topic that most people do not talk about. And I want to talk about this particular topic because in the month of July, we celebrate friendships, we celebrate independence of the United States, or whatever part of the world you're from. We celebrate different things. But sometimes we don't celebrate the successes of how far we've come emotionally. Sometimes we don't celebrate how far we've come mentally, because life has been throwing different things at us. And we're living in a particular day and age where many people are struggling. They're using external things for pleasure while the inside is imploding. And I want to talk about certain areas about soul wounds. So many of you may not know what soul wounds are. What is emotional healing, generational wounds, traumas, rejection, abandonment, betrayal. I don't know about you. If you have lived any amount of time, those of you who are watching, you're going to experience some type of rejection, whether it be denied for a job or being rejected as a sibling, spouse, in a relationship, in a ministry, whatever have you. As a senior pastor, that's one of the vocations that God has called me to do, is be a pastor. But outside of that, I was a social worker for about 17 and a half years, and I've seen so many different people throughout different walks of life, whether it's in law enforcement, whether it's in education, whether it's in the prison system, whether it's in the medical professions or business, or even those who are well-to-do. They just don't deal with mental health. And mental health, many times people feel like you're crazy, or it's a taboo, or we're not going to deal with this. We're just going to put it away. We're just going to dash it away. But I want to talk about BIPOC. And one of the things about BIPOC, that's a particular word that many people don't understand. And BIPOC in the month of July is Mental Health Month. It's originally originated from the National Minority Mental Health Awareness Month. Mental Health Month was created to bring awareness to the unique population of those who have been disenfranchised historically and oppressed by racial and ethnic groups within the United States. Now, BIPOC deals with Black, Indigenous, and other people of color who experience a broad spectrum of discrimination, oppression, and systematic racism, which we all can experience in some type of bureaucratic system, whether it's in ministry, whether it's the Black and brown people against other persuasions, whether you have the Asian people coming in, or, Caucasian, or Latinos or Hispanic people. We all experience some particular racism based upon our context, where we come from. So I want to talk about systemic racism, and which creates the conditions for both collective and individual traumas within our communities. And oftentimes when we are looking at an individual, we look at the outside first. So we often judge a person on the outside. And why I felt compelled to talk about this particular topic, it was because I have been a recipient of an emotional wound, or many emotional wounds. And I decided as an author to write a book dealing with shame, rejection, areas where you felt like it was not so good to talk about. And most people then coming from a Caribbean background, we're told and we're forced to say, just get over it. Just shove it under the rug, and what goes on in this house stays in this house. And I decided that I no longer wanted to cover my shame. I no longer wanted to be the person who will continue to perpetuate a generational cycle of keeping quiet. So God had pretty much raised me up in my particular family as the first generation who comes to break the silence on shame, break the silence on abuse, break the silence on sexual abuse, abandonment, rejection, neglect. If that's you who are watching, these are areas that most families don't want to talk about, whether it's a high affluent family or a marginalized family, right? So most times we kind of deflect. We act like we're good. We look good on the outside. And I want to just bring to your attention two books that pretty much, one, my book is Shattered Shame and Rejection, Uncovering the Modern Day Molech. Now, Molech is the god of child sacrifice, right? And one of the shames that I entered into was having an abortion at 15 years old. And I talked about it in my first episode when we were talking about certain reasons why I decided to do Tea Time with Dr. Kelly, and that it will be a safe place for other people to talk about. So Shattered Shame and Rejection, Uncovering the Modern Day Molech. You could get this on Amazon. You could get it on our website, nabihakellyministries.org. And you will begin to see a journey of a young girl who opened up a whirlwind of murder, perpetual abortions, and hiding, and then getting saved, and then having to testify of how God began to use this particular book around the world. And most often when I go to different, establishments, most people don't want to talk about this. So it's pretty much shoved aside, or it's like a secret that you put in a grave that you never, ever expose. And in the journey of dealing with rejection and shame, I began to do further studies that shame just doesn't come there. It's placed there. Shame comes by someone telling you to keep quiet. Shame or guilt makes you feel bad about something that you have done or something that was put on you. Most of the times when someone has been shamed, it's as somebody who give you public humiliation. So I was publicly humiliated in church and outside of church. So I decided to write this book for those who felt like they were undeserving of God's love. I wrote this book so that people will know that there's life after trauma, there's life after abuse, and there's life after just doing things that may seem deplorable or you just want a way out, period. Another book is that this book is by Bessel van der Kolk, and it talks about the body keeps score. And one of these books I added as a reference, as I have a doctorate. Why you see Dr. Kelly, I have a doctorate, and one of the researches that I used was the body keeps score, because the body itself takes a picture of trauma. So the body begins to remember everything that you have done or things that have been done to you, right? So this particular book talks about certain things that you have experienced in your life from childhood to adolescenthood, or even when you're in your adulthood. There's certain relationships that you entered. There's certain things that you may have experienced, and the body begins to take score. And why it says the body takes score, people deal with bitterness. So the body begins to start manifesting in certain things because of bitterness, unforgiveness, trauma, fear, all type of things. Certain parts of your body begins to react to what you've been carrying emotionally and spiritually and physically. So this particular book, those of you who are watching, I am not the author of this book, but this book will be able to help those who are really trying to heal from emotional, mental, physical abuse, traumas that you had no control over. Because how many know that we haven't picked our family to be born into? We have been born into certain families, and we have pretty much no hand on who's our mother or our father, or what aunt or uncle touched us, or, somebody went through something in their family. So this particular book talks about all of that. And it's in my dissertation. I used it as one of the references to help the women that I had to counsel as a clinician and as a consultant and a counselor. So this particular book was one that I also used as Molech. And using these particular books helped me to delve into people lifestyle while I was counseling them. And in my dissertation, I dealt with healing post-abortion trauma amongst females in clergy, which was a taboo topic. So I wanted to discuss basically mental health, emotional wounds. Why do we go through it? For those of you who are wondering what an emotional wound is, it's a wound that comes in the soulish realm. Soul wounds are deep emotional, mental, or spiritual injuries that affect your identity, the way we perceive things, the ability to function emotionally or even relationally, right? And even sometimes spiritually, because some of the things that we've been through in our life, sometimes we don't even feel good enough to go to God and talk to him about some of the things that we've been through. So when we look at soul wounds, these are deep things that are not on the surface. It's similar to those of us who have had a cut or a laceration. The skin heals, the epidermis heals, but if you press it deep enough, you will still feel a little tenderness, or you will feel pain underneath a scab or underneath something that is healing, right? So when I look at soul wounds, they are wounds of the inner self, the mind, the will, and the intellect, the emotions. Now, the intellect, the mind, the amygdala in the brain. The amygdala is like an almond shape, thing in the brain that controls our feelings and our emotions. And it takes pictures of things that we have been through. So if you have ever been through betrayal, abandonment, trauma, abuse, violence, loss, rejection, or neglect, right? The amygdala communicates to the heart. Now, they said the heart is where all the thing that is like the seat of our emotions. But the truth of the matter is it's the brain that communicates to the heart what the heart is going to feel. The heart is just the organ that is pumping blood to and from, to give and take blood. So the heart is a vital organ. So the brain is communicating to the heart that something is wrong. Trauma has occurred. Pain is there, bitterness, unforgiveness. So the brain is constantly communicating things to the heart. So I want to talk about this particular incident in my life, particularly where I went through a traumatic situation with my son's father, where basically he tried to kill me. broke my nose, fractured my cheekbone. So anytime anything come close to my nose, right, it feels as if I have post-traumatic stress disorder, if that's the right correct term that I will use, because anything that come close is as if somebody is still hitting me in my face. So that is what happens with emotional wounds if they're not healed. That is what happens to people when they have been through abuses or trauma. You close your eyes and you can relive that thing over and over and over and over again. So when we look at emotional wounds, when we see the deep down depth of things that we have been through, generational systems of pain, there's something called a genealogram. A genealogram, and some of you may want to Google it, genealogram. It looks like a family tree. But this particular genealogram, it deals with the paternal side and the maternal side. So it goes back generations. And it's a behavioral thing where you go back generations from your mother to see what kind of behaviors she does, or the father, it goes back, whether it's alcohol, whether it's, molestation, abuse, all type of things. You have to go back and look at the patterns in certain families to see what has come down to your current generation. So a genealogram will help you map out some traumas that were unresolved. A genealogram will tell you that there's still certain behaviors that you have some traits of. Now, we have innate behavior and we also have learned behavior. Most of the things that we have been through is because we learned and we experienced it. So when we go back to the generations, the genealogram, it goes back to where your mother was, alcohol. It goes back to if she had first one divorce or a second divorce or multiple partners, and you go back and you begin to see even diseases that goes into the family bloodline. So the genealogram is very effective with seeing if you are currently presenting those type of traumas, those type of behaviors. So the spirit of man will always sustain his infirmity, right? According to Proverbs 18 and 14. Number two, when we begin to look at trauma and look at emotional wounds, personal connections. Do you got a personal connection to pain? Come on, drop it in the comment section. Personal trauma and personal pain. You're a first hander, first responder of pain, or first recipient of pain. Now, write in the book on shattered shame and rejection coming from a Caribbean family. They only tell you just don't get pregnant. They don't talk to you about the ramifications of having sex outside of marriage. It just puts shame on you, and then they begin to shoo you and then quiet it up, right? And I think that's in other cultures as well. Anything that will bring shame on a family, we don't want to glorify, but if we do get good grades in school, if we do this. So I thought that if I could be performance driven, that's an inner emotional wound, to be performance driven. And I began to think about this topic. There's an emotional wound sometimes for acceptance. So we perform. And when you're performance driven, it looks like we're succeeding. So I said, I thought if I could get this degree, I'm going to feel better. I'm not going to feel the shames of where I come from in my family or what I've done. So let me get this degree. Then after you get that degree, then you find something else to pack on. Then you got to be perfect in this area. Then you got to be perfect in that area. And it comes and it piles on to the point where you're not dealing with the root of that wound. Now, your heart, the heart. How do we help others deal with the heart? When the heart could be deceitful, the heart can't even really tell the truth because sometimes the heart don't even understand what truth is, right? So when we look at the heart, how do we identify a wound? What does a wound look or feel like? Sometimes wounds may include, talking about the heart, easily triggered or overly sensitive to reactions, being defensive. When somebody touch a particular area of your life, you become explosive. Maybe I still got some wounds because I be exploding every now and again when I get a chance. You feel me? Maybe I got some stuff that I really need to go work out, right? Because I think that sometimes we thought we were healed from something until we're touched in that area again in the heart. Another area of the emotional wound could be fear of abandonment or rejection. Working in the social service industry, I've seen the depravity in families, and most of those children, when they're dropped off through CPS or Child Protective Services, They always crying. I want my mommy, I want my daddy. They want their abuser or they want the one that reject them. So when the parents don't come to visits, we have to deal with the children who have a fear of going to foster parents because they're afraid that someone is going to leave them. So we begin to look at a fear of abandonment or rejection. That's an emotional wound. The heart communicates like, I'm going into fight or flight. That's why sometimes we stay in toxic relationships because we have a fear of really dealing with that, a wound of abandonment and rejection. The constant need for validation. A person who is emotionally wounded, they always want someone to validate them, to always, tell them they're doing good, you're doing well, everything is going to be all right. But deep down inside, that person is never, ever going to feel all right until they deal with the issue in their heart. Also, difficulty trusting others. In this society, growing up, most offenses happen in our own homes faster than strangers. Most hurts happen with people you trusted. So trusting others or even trusting God can be hard when you have an emotional wound. So in the month of July, there are some areas that people are going to really have to deal with if they want to progress in life. If you want a healthy relationship, sometimes you're going to have to find a clinician. You're going to have to find a psychologist. You're going to have somebody who can help you process all of these things. Another area is struggles with self-worth and identity. There's something also called an imposter syndrome, where you're always comparing yourself. You don't feel like you're good enough, right? And if you're around me, I'm going to make you feel like you the best thing in sliced bread. But after a while, you don't want to keep on telling me, oh, you so good, you this, you that, oh, you so beautiful. But deep down inside, it's like you become it's like a burden because you really don't feel it for yourself. So that's why you can't even really be around people who are constantly, oh, poor me, and their spirit is low and all of that. You got to get away from those people sometimes, because sometimes they can suck you in and you begin to feel heavy. That's an emotional wound that could be displaced on you. So when we look at struggles with self-worth, so many people, and I want to say this, I want to put this disclaimer in there. So many people, the enemy don't hit us when we're big. The enemy always comes at an infantile or a primitive stage in our life to attack us in a weakness. So that's why we feel like we're not good enough. So if you heard your parents say you're stupid, you're never going to make it, you're poor, they start speaking language over you and you start believing those things. It deals with self-worth. So there's an emotional wound there, repeating cycles and patterns in unhealthy relationships. And I began to look at my mother's relationship, my relationships, my grandmother's relationships, great-grandparents' relationships going on my maternal side. Great-grandparents were married, loved each other, never really had children out of wedlock, no children out of wedlock. But then you reveal, after time, there were some outside children that they kept secret. Great-grandpa had some outside children. And we begin to see the cycle perpetuate to the next generation, which is my grandmother. So my grandmother and my grandfather had children, but there were several outside children amongst both of them. Cycle. Then my mother, we're looking at patterns through generations. My particular mother had a child out of wedlock, which is myself. Her father told her to abort me, which was spoken over her womb. So how I entered into abortions, because it was already spoken over my life. So my mother had 2 boyfriends. Well, my father was just probably like somebody casual, my biological father. But she jumped the fence. And my mother kept the secret for 6 years of me not being that man's child. So you begin to see cycles repeat itself unless it's broken. Then me, my current generation, had a child out of wedlock with my son. And there were certain cycles that I was not able to kill until I came to the knowledge of Jesus Christ. Then I decided to do it the right way. Talked about learned behavior, talked about trauma. I tried to do it the right way, do it the godly way, get married in church. You don't want to sin. You don't want to have sex out of marriage. But we slipped and fell a couple of times. Let me throw that disclaimer out A couple of times in the beginning, you know what I'm saying? And ask for forgiveness. You act like you fasting, you praying and all of this stuff, right? But I end up marrying my mom. Emotionally depraved, disconnected, didn't know how to say I love you. She began to repeat the cycles. Your parents love you based upon them cooking and providing the necessary days, but I never heard it. Not saying I'm sorry. So now I'm dealing with my mother in my home. So when you look at cycles of unhealthy relationship, you could be able to trace it back. So those are emotional wounds that were never ever killed in the generation. We also see chronic shame, anger, sadness. These are areas where out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speak. When a person is angry, they speak everything. When a person is not forgiven or they don't forgive themselves, one of the things that I had to learn and come to terms with, the Bible tells us to forgive others. But it really tells us to forgive ourselves, because there's some things that we have done and we don't even feel deserving that God will forgive us, right? The only scripture I can say that can correlate with forgiving myself will be Romans chapter 8, verse 1, where it says there's no condemnation now for those that are in Christ Jesus, who walk after the Spirit and not after the flesh. But that particular scripture don't even say forgive yourself, Nabiha. So I walked around with chronic shame for years and years and years. And this is something that was never unpackaged until I began to understand the healing power of God. But just imagine somebody who never have that encounter with God. They're walking around with shame and they don't feel like they're deserving to be forgiven. They're angry with themselves. They're calling themselves failures. They feel as if they don't have worth, and they begin to perpetuate the cycle. Now, inner healing is the process of allowing God, often through spiritual and therapeutic methods. So I'm like a spiritual counselor, and I also do therapeutic methods. So there's different type of clinical methods, right? You could do it psychologist way, or you could do it spiritually, right? Now, inner healing is to heal emotional wounds, traumatic memories, and distorted beliefs that are rooted in pain. We talk about revisiting painful places with Jesus, renouncing lies. We could tell ourselves some lies, and we could believe the lies what the enemy tells us. We also see replacing things with the truth. Embellishing stories is an emotional wound that we need healing from. Sometimes we got to fabricate things. Sometimes we got to live so lavish, have this mania lifestyle, but really deep down inside, we don't even believe what we're living. So we also see there are times where we got to release it, reclaiming peace, purpose, and identity. So inner healing is allowing God for you to revisit. So oftentimes when I go through therapy with someone, I take them back to the point of the pain. Let's go through and let's process back to that. And a lot of people book me for one-on-ones where I help them go through the journey of inner healing. Also, there's some things that we have spoken, some word curses, some vows. One of the vows that I said I had to renounce was that I ain't never gonna fall in love with a man. I'm never gonna love anybody, because when that man rejected me as his daughter, when he found out I wasn't his daughter, I made a vow in my heart that I would never ever let a man ever reject me or discard me like that. So I built up a propensity to say, I ain't never falling in love. I ain't got time to fall in love, right? And I made a vow that I would never ever fall in love with a man. And God had to teach me how to renounce things, because certain things we make vows in ignorance and lies that we have believed. So when you're going through inner healing, you're going to have to revisit. You're going to have to go back and renounce some things, some words that were spoken, some things that you have spoken over your life. Another area is replacing them with truth. Now, you got to find things that you really believe about yourself now. Now, you're spending time with yourself. You're sitting in your emotions. Now, you really, really got to see yourself naked. And I remember I was living in the Bronx, New York, and I had like a big mirrors on my wall. This is before I had my second child. And Demetrius was small. My son was very small. And I remember standing in front of the mirror. And oftentimes we look in the mirror. I'm beautiful aesthetically on the outside. And it was like something told me to stand there and stare at myself. Stand there and look at myself. And I had to go look at myself for a long while. And standing there, it's like a smoke screen went up. And I began to see the nakedness of who I really was. It was hard to embrace the sensitive child, the sensitive woman who was caring and loving. It was hard to embrace that because life made me put on, layers to the point where I couldn't look at myself in the mirror for a long, extensive period. You get dressed and you just look on the surface. But when God told me to stand in that mirror, you now begin to see yourself naked, vulnerable, to the point where I got to stand here and really look at all the lies that I told myself, all the lies that I believed. And I had to begin to release those things to myself. I had to begin to say all the emotions that I buried, all the things that I had to put in different pockets and compartmentalize things. And I had to deal with those things face to face with Nabiha. Forget about titles, forget about pastor, prophet, prayer warrior, forget about, because sometimes we hide behind titles and we don't want to deal with renouncing and replacing those lies with truths. So when you replace those lies with truths, now you got to stand on those truths. Now you got to begin to start dealing with the things that hurt. Now you got to reclaim peace. What does peace look like when you was in turmoil for all your life? You got to begin to identify, where is peace? Peace in all of this, in dealing with inner healing. And when you lean into God, the enemy is never going to make you feel peaceful. That's why we have a lot of uneasiness. People are dealing with anxiety. People are dealing with fear. People are dealing with oppression, mental oppression. They're dealing with so many other areas that they can't reclaim their peace because they haven't filled or replaced the lies with the truth or the word of God. Now, there are different types of inner healing or different types of healing practice. And one of the practices is faith-based. We have prayer, deliverance. Many people say deliverance is a choice. And I believe that deliverance comes in stages. Some things are instantaneous, while other things, it's a process of deliverance, right? Some things, like me, I never smoked or drank alcohol, so I need to be delivered from that. But a promiscuous background, oh yeah, I had to be delivered from a lot of things. And faith-based healing, it comes with forgiveness, reading the word of God, and prophetic counsel, sound counsel. But how do you find sound counsel where everybody else look crazy? How do you find sound counsel when, I'm trying to get healed and the church looks sick? The people who are in the pulpit look like they don't even have what it takes to heal. So you end up struggling in silence. So there's faith-based practices that can foster healing when the atmosphere is right, when the people are walking upright before God, when they know identity and they have identity. Another area of healing process is therapeutic, where you have Christian counseling, trauma-informed therapy, also holistic healing. We have journaling, inner healing, writing, also rest, Sabbath, taking care of self-care, getting eucalyptus and, whatever you doing to get healing. You spend that time and you make yourself put in a place where, okay, I'm just going to go to the spa today. So you find different ways that is holistic. Now, when we encourage listeners, those of you who are watching, sometimes it's hard to go to the root. What is that pressing thing that keeps on showing up in every area of your life? What is that root issue, that wound that it seems like it's spilling over into your friendships, into your sentimental life, into your work life, into your spiritual life? That root is what you need God or what you need somebody to zero in. This is what you have to pay attention to, the thing that is not on the surface. So for example, there's a man named Pete Scazzaro. He has a book called The Emotional Healthy Church or The Emotional Healthy Person. And it talks about most often we only deal with the iceberg that's on the top. An iceberg is something underneath the water. So that's like emotional wounds underneath the water, right? You don't see what's under the water. So we have to go deep below what is the root Because the surface thing that we saying that we're pining over, that's not the issue. The root, we got to go back to the root. Where did it start from? Did it start when they went into your bedroom and they tampered with you? Where did the root start from? Poor relationship, poor communication, conflict resolution, or lack thereof. Where did the root start? Where you had insecurities? Who told you weren't good enough? Where were those word curses? Where did they come from? So we have to go under the water or under the basement steps to begin to dig up everything. Before you could get healed, you got to get dirty. You got to get ugly. You got to go through all of these different things for the thing to be able to come surface so that you'll be able to wash it away. So inner healing, emotional wounds, if we're not able to get to the root, we're going to allow the roots to go deeper and deeper and deeper. If we don't kill the root, it's going to fester in your everyday life, in your relationships. Now, those of you who are watching, you could journal. Things about your healing, it could be very cathartic when you write. When you sit down and see what your mindset is in the time of whatever you're going through. I guarantee you, if you're peaceful and you write it, oh, bless the Lord, or you're writing, oh, this was a good day. But I guarantee you, when you're angry, you're going through something, you will begin to see the pen start going, your handwriting looks crazy, and then you go back and be like, what was I thinking at that time? So it's good to go back and journal. Another area where we need to deal with, in order to deal with the root, is grief and to grieve. And most of our communities, we don't know how to grieve properly. We need to grieve our last season. We need to mourn the death of things that were lost. Loss is real. How do we deal with the things that we had no control over, that was placed on us? We got to grieve things that we're not in control of. We got to write down grief. What does grief look like? The 5 stages of grief. Have you accepted that your mother was deceitful? I had to accept that my mother was deceitful because it caused me many years of wondering why I could not settle down and love a man. It took me many years to figure out why I really didn't really care. If I wouldn't take a man, I would challenge a man. I would challenge him because of what I came from. Because I'm never ever going to let a man reject me again. So remember, I'm bringing this from 6 years old into my adult years. And the root was stemming and keep on growing. And how that root was killed was, in my doctoral class, we had this assessment that we had to do called the M360. So it's like a battery of tests that you have to send to your supervisor on the job, your family, your pastors, or people who are in clergy, somebody who you work with, business owners, people who know you. So you send this link to everybody. And if they're all saying the same thing and you're believing the lie that you told yourself, they will show you that there's a common thread in all of those things. Because I was very defensive. I was combative and I was not submitted. And all of that began to come out in that assessment from different people. So that's how the root began to get exposed. And then sitting in the classroom setting. So that's why you can't put a limit on how your deliverance comes. So I'm sitting in the classroom and I remember my professor telling me, Nabiha, your problem is not spiritual. It's emotional deprivation. So I'm like, what are you talking about? Well, you need to go to counseling. I'm like, who do you think he talking to? You got to go to counseling. He said, Nabiha, your problem is not spiritual. So I thought that, I'm anointed. I'm fasting. I'm praying. I ain't dealing with the emotional side. So I'm praying. And remember, we're mind, body, soul, and spirit. So I was overperforming in church. I was on every auxiliary. I was on time and everything. But there was the emotional wounds that I would not deal with. And then to top it off, God rest his soul, Dr. Martin Sanders, they did a rite of passage in the classroom. So a rite of passage was basically men and women of God and you going through and they're praying for you. And I remember Dr. Rob Rima and Dr. Sanders came to me and said, I'm sorry. And they began to be like the person who injured me. They began to apologize and stand proxy for whatever happened or what my mother did or what my father did. And all of a sudden, what was the root, it began to break in the classroom. They apologized for my father not being there. They apologized for the rejection that men had did to me. And that was where the stuff started breaking, all from that M360 survey. That's why you have to be open to how God is going to, or how God is going to use people to give you your breakthrough and give you your healing. And then it didn't stop there. He said, you need to go to a therapist. So I remember him telling me, go to this therapist in Greenwich, Connecticut. So Greenwich, Connecticut now is one of the most affluent communities in all of the United States. So I'm going. He said, no, you're not going to go to anybody that is black or brown. You're not going to anybody that understands your culture. I am sending you, because in order to get your doctorate, you are required to get counseling. So you got to deal with this inner healing. You got to deal with this root. You got to deal with it. Because sometimes you just deal with it a little bit and then it comes back and then it begins to go bigger. So anyway, I went to this lady, Dr. Ingrid, and I sat there and I'm all spiritually proud and I'm puffed up, acting like I'm so anointed. And I'm looking at this Caucasian woman with her blue eyes and she got her big Rolls Royce and just different things. And I was like, what this white woman could tell me? This is my attitude sitting there, just sitting there. And dealing with emotional wounds, and I'm all stiff, and I'm acting like, yes, and speaking in tongues and acting like I'm so deep. The woman pulls the chair right in front of me. Just simple, Spirit of the Lord come. And I'm like, she don't know I'm the chief intercessor in the church. Because sometimes we act like that. But she sat down, she said, what happened at the age of 6? And it was like something went boop in my stomach. All of a sudden, all the years that I didn't cry, all the years I was numb, the inner wounds began to start to bubble over. And that is where the roots started to begin to pull out. Because she began to start pulling out things. So this month of July, I want you to find someone to get help from. This month of July, don't take it for granted. You start in the next 6 months, and we're going to enter into the ember months, the September, October, November, December, right? While you have chance and while you have breath in your body, seek out counseling. Seek out wise counsel. Get the help you need. Take time for yourself. Put the oxygen mask on yourself. Be around people who are objective and people who are going to tell you you need help. I believe that this is a month where we must take time. If we got to go and read or go take a walk because it's going to help our mental health get better, I think that you need to do it. So this particular session with this podcast, this broadcast, this episode, I believe that someone that is watching, you're at the brink of your crossing over to greater. But if you don't deal with that little root, it's going to cause you a setback. Those of you who are watching, you have been ashamed. You have been betrayed. You feel abandoned. You feel like you're not good enough. I come to tell you, if God has done it for me, he could do it for you. I come to encourage those who are watching, those viewers, those who are subscribing, those who are sharing this, that your life is going to come in alignment. I want to encourage you all to get the help. Read books. Get material. Read the word of God. It's the antidote to life. There's much prescriptions in the Bible. Also get other material where you're able to aid and get delivered and healed. So I want to thank you all for joining Tea Time with Dr. Kelly. And I decided to talk about this particular mental health topic so that you will be aware, bring awareness to your life, to your family. Go back, sit down and have conversations with yourself. Sit down with yourself, sit in your feelings and really embrace what you are feeling. It's okay to feel. It's okay to cry. It's okay to journal. It's okay to say that you messed up. It's okay to ask for forgiveness. It's okay to forgive yourself. I had to learn how to forgive myself. So just tell yourself that it's going to be all right. And it's time for me to take action. This is a month of action, the month of action where you take your mental health serious. Those of you who are watching, we want to thank you for joining us, for subscribing to Tea Time with Dr. Kelly, where you spill the tea and we pour back into you. This is an awesome, awesome time to get your better self to the forefront and leave the old behind. Have a wonderful day. Please, 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 please subscribe, share, and tag someone. Thank you all for joining us for our episode with Tea Time with Dr. Kelly. And we look forward to seeing you another time. Just remember, subscribe, tag, share, put your notifications on as we continue to spill the tea.